you for having me, Pastor Liz Kingsley. I am honored. May the Lord continue to use you in all that you do. Thank you for honoring me. Thank you for allowing me to speak today and be part of the speakers this morning. I never take lightly when I'm asked to speak because I know that I have everything I have and the person that I have become is because of God's grace, and I do not qualify. And therefore, because I don't qualify, I allow the Spirit of God Himself to lead me and to guide me. So I'm praying that God will minister to each and every one of you and look at my life, that I've come from a place was come from obscurity to God's taking me to the limelight, not by my own making, but really by God's design, because He has a good plan for each and every one of us, and that plan is a good one. So without wasting any more time, I'll be talking to you today about property investments. My own journey was started off in 2007 when I came across a property investor, Steve Bolton, who then taught me property. So the difference is, he said to me, Caroline, you want to become either a property investor or you want to become a landlady. And there's a difference. And so my idea was for me not to become a landlady and instead to become a property investor, meaning I had to run a business. So there's so many landlords and landladies out there. And if that becomes your aim, that's okay if that's where you want to go. But if you really want to thrive, if you really want to go where God wants for you to become, you must have one thing in your mind, and that's be intentional and purposeful to occupy, which means you can't be thinking small. You can't be thinking small, little bit of acquisitions here and there. Your thing is to allow God to be God and to think big. And you can't think big if you're thinking as a landlord or landlady. If you're thinking as a business owner and entrepreneur that's thinking about taking over, then I believe that we can have conversations. So I'm not going to talk about your personal buying a property for you to live in. I'll be talking about property investments, because if you want to thrive, think about wealth creation. So I'll share with you my presentation, hopefully, so I can just make so it becomes easier for all of us. What was it called? Property. So first of all, quick disclaimer: the session is purely educational. So don't take everything else that I will say as to take on and go and start investing. It's to give you education to help you make informed decisions when it comes to thinking about getting started on the property ladder. I encourage you to go and get the professional support from people that are professional advisors who will give you the adequate information based on your current circumstances, so you can make better choices when it comes to actually investments. So moving forward, the first thing I want to start off with is to understand clearly, first of all, if you want to become wealthy and you are on the platform, and my journey is everything else that I do is God-led. So it's getting clarity on what is God saying, what is God's description, because circumstances notwithstanding, right now people are talking about COVID, all the circumstances where people are losing jobs, and there's a reality to that. The difference is you have to look at yourself and understand what is the scripture saying about my personal journey, where I'm at today. If I must thrive, whether they are circumstances that are maybe hindering, how do I overcome that? So the scripture in the book of Deuteronomy 8:18 says, "But you shall remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to create wealth, so that he may establish the covenant which he swore unto our forefathers." Now, for me, when I read that scripture, it gave me a good basis to understand that God desires for me to create wealth. However, he says he will give me power. And why do you need power? Because there is contention. So your job is to know that there will be contention, but the power of God will actually help me to be propelled to my next level towards where God wants for me to become. The book of Isaiah 48 talks about, "And the Lord thy God that teacheth thee to profit." So if God is going to teach you how to profit, you're going to require the wisdom of God. And wisdom is knowing what to do and doing it. At times, we go to seminars from one place to the other, seeking for the wisdom, seeking for the knowledge of understanding in terms of what to do. When it comes to application, many people stop by not doing something, being intentional enough and gathering the courage to actually go out there and to occupy and take over. So we have to understand that we will need God, because they are the territories we're going after. There is somebody else that is sitting right now in your place. There's another principality, another, there's the enemy that is also waiting in that space. So your job is to know I need the wisdom of God. I need the power of God. I need the understanding. I need the facts. I need to know exactly where we're at today, so much I must occupy and take over. I believe in this season we must become like the men of the men that were described, I believe, in the book of Chronicles, the men of Issachar, who understood their times. These men knew the strategies and what was going on, so they were so ready to go and occupy. So as Pastor Liz has put this particular event, I'm sure each and every one of you, you're going to get so much knowledge and wisdom. The question you must always ask yourself, I have been educated. Am I going to gather the courage, the boldness to go out there and go and occupy? Why? Because God wants for you to do it, but you don't want to stand in God's way without having to take any action, because He will empower, He will give you the courage. And it's not easy, but you know what? Nothing in life is very easy. So I hope that as I share with you some of these strategies, that you know that this is God's plan. You know that this is God's desire, because this is your time, this is your season, and I believe this is our season. So the 7 steps to successful investment is the basis of what I'm going to talk to you about. The first one is getting clarity of vision. You must have an idea of where you want to go. Because if you look at someone like Abraham, God asked him to say, look up and count how many stars, how many can you see? His desire was for him to have, children. And God said, if you can count as many, that's how many I'm going to be able to give. Once you look to the north, the east, and the west, and the south, as far as your eyes can see, so will you occupy. So vision is so important. You need to be clear around where do you want to be in the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. If you have got children, your child is, for argument's sake, 5 years old. In 10 years' time, they'll be 15. What will be happening in their lives at that time? So you want to make sure you have a clear plan around where you will be at that particular time. If you're in your 40s, for argument's sake, and you're maybe working in a private sector or even maybe government sector, you're thinking about retirement, make sure you have a clear plan and say, I will be at that time. I'll be so many years at that time, and therefore I will need to make sure I have income that will take care of my needs, take care of people around me, and so I can also have greater impact towards humanity. When you're clear of your vision, then I'll put together a strategy of how you're actually going to actualize that particular vision. Think about the things that you're going to do. As people will say, I'm a great believer that God is interested in the detail. You don't want to shortchange yourself, but just having fuzzy objectives, fuzzy strategies. Things have to be very clear to help you understand that if anybody else came and they saw what you've written down, they'll be able to pick up on that and run with you. That's the essence of having a vision. Book of Habakkuk talks about, like, write your vision down and make it plain. Make it plain so anybody else who will find it, they can run with it. Then the third step is for you to look at performing due diligence. Understanding you have to go and spy the land and understand who is in that space, what are they doing, what is working, what's not working, how do I then position myself and be able to move forward. Step 4 is avoid get rich quick schemes, because people right now, you'll get desperate because of your personal circumstances, and you get sold all sorts of things. Make sure you can pace yourself. Avoid quick things. Think, you know what? Everything else has seasons, and therefore I would take my time in getting things done. Be very proactive, but don't look for shortcuts of little things you can't get here and there. Step 5 is understand the taxes and fees that are associated with every investment. No investment has taxes and fees. Everything has got taxes and fees. Now, if you're doing yourself a budget and your plan is in 5 years' time, you want to have passive income of £10,000 a month from your property investments, know what it will have to take for you to end up with £10,000. How many more properties should you have, and how much income should you have? Take away the taxation, take away all other fees, then that you know exactly what you're going to be working with. Step number 6 is develop a support network of people that are like-minded, people that are going to places where you want to get to. Find professionals, people who will support you along the journey, people who hold your hand, people who are very much in their thinking towards becoming successful, because I believe that if you're clear in those areas, um, God working with you, you move in that direction. Number 7, develop a success mindset. If you want to change the fruit, change the root. It's no point if you realize that there's some things that are hindering you. Your job is to go and think, change, how do I think and why do I think this way? And is my thinking supportive towards becoming a successful investor, and or is it non-supportive? And if it is supportive, keep doing more of it. If it's not, then look at changing it so that you can change your mindset and position yourself for greatness. So let's go straight into property investments, right? Okay, so for you to become a successful property investor, you must understand, first of all, what are you aiming for? And if I would be real with you, I would say if you're starting off from a place of zero, aim to, first of all, aim for financial freedom. Now, financial freedom is knowing exactly what your financial freedom number is. That means you want to understand, if I'm going to get into property investments, what sort of property investments can I have that will give me X amount of money or income that is replacing my current income from my job? So you want to know, what is your current lifestyle? How much do you spend per month? And how much will you need per month? That becomes target number 1, your financial freedom. If you're doing that, you are automatically designing your own destiny. You're putting things in place to make sure, if I get to financial freedom, that's step 1. Then I'm going to move into wealth creation, right? Because there are totally two different, in my description, financial freedom is just one aspect. So you just stop, you stop trading your time for money. And wealth creation, you go beyond, where you begin to impact your world. So you want to start, first of all, to know, how can I get to a place where I stop to trade my time for money by developing a property portfolio? If, for example, you have a goal of replacing your income, and if your current living expenses are £1,800, your job is to think about the property investment strategy that you can begin to embark on that will allow you to buy those properties. So if you have got a job, you can start even with building a property portfolio, even in the north or different parts of the country where properties are a lot cheaper. So you start off whilst you're in your lane, spending so many bits, so much amount of money, well, the property, investing so much amount of money that you can actually afford. So if I was doing this and I was starting off, I don't have too much time, but yet I have some money, I'd look at starting off, for example, in the northeast of England or the northwest of England. Properties are a lot cheaper. If you bought a house there, if your target was to buy, to have income of £1,800, if you're buying properties in the northeast, you would buy 5 properties that over, say for argument's sake, 3 years as the period of time you've set for yourself, and that 5 properties will give you income of £1,800. Then you know that that's stage 1. Stage 2 will be, my financial freedom will be maybe in 5 years' time, because I need £3,000. Then that also becomes the next part of your wealth creation, of your financial freedom strategy, because that's how much you're spending per month, and therefore you grow a property portfolio that will help you to be able to meet those financial obligations over the period of time. And then, or you could look at setting yourself a target and saying, you know what, but if I get to my financial freedom number of £3,000, then I can now begin to build my wealth creation portfolio, which means it's no longer about meeting your day-to-day needs. This is about creating an empire of properties that will allow you to get passive income, whether that will be of £10,000, £20,000, whatever your goal is. So before you get started in property investments, you want to become bankable. Many people want to get onto the property ladder, but they're not bankable. And what does that really mean? Understanding that, will the bank see me as an investment or a liability? And these are the 3 areas that they're looking for. Number 1 is looking at your income. How much money do you earn? If you don't earn any money, banks are not prepared to lend you any money, because you are not bankable. So which means you have to start thinking about going to get a job or finding other businesses you can embark upon that allow you to be able to build some income, and they can see that you're earning some money. And this is the current, now most lenders have different criteria. At the moment, most lenders are looking at the income ratio of say 4 to 4.5 times of your annual income. So if you earn £20,000, most banks are okay to lend you up to 4.5 times to 5 times of your £20,000. So they can lend you up to £100,000 if you are earning £20,000 a month. So your job is to know, if I'm going to buy a property and the property price for the one I'm trying to buy is 200,000. If it's 200,000, you're earning £100,000, you better have a huge amount of money as a deposit, because the banks will only lend you up to £100,000. You now have to go and find the difference of the £100,000. So your job is to know, where am I at? So if you're considering getting started and you don't have a lot of income, then think about it this way. Because if I'm going to borrow money and I'm going to buy a house in London, the cost of properties in London is very different. I'll go further up in the northeast of England. The property price typically for a 3-bedroom house is, and the ones that we're looking at right now, they're about £75,000. Now, that amount of money for your deposit, all you need is a smaller amount of deposit. So which means your income ratio, if you're only earning £20,000, you can actually afford it. So affordability is very, very important. So it's so important for you to know, what am I earning right now that will help me become bankable? If you know what your numbers are in terms of where you're at, then you can do something about it. If you're not earning enough, then think about, can I start up another business? What else can I do to increase my income so that I can show to the banks that actually I'm earning so much money? The second thing you want to consider is understanding, first of all, in fact, let me just go back that particular one. So the 3 areas, I mentioned only the one about your income ratios. So the banks, to become bankable, is number 1, your income ratio. Number 2, you must have a deposit. You need to have, if you're getting into property investments as an investor, the minimum for most banks will lend you at the moment is 20%. They'll give you loan to value property opportunities so you need to have at least 20% deposit of that amount of money. So understand that, do I have enough deposits to be able to buy that particular property investment? And the third thing is becoming bankable is your credit score, your credit rating. So make sure that your credit score, your credit history is in a good place. These are the 3 main areas that banks will look out for. So number 1, your income ratio, which is your earning potential. Number 2, your credit score. And number 3, your deposit, how much money you have to put down as a deposit for that property. As you're considering with your property investment in starting off, there are 2 things that I want for you to look at. Number 1 is understanding, do I want to become an active investor or a passive investor? An active investor simply means that you're actually involved in, from day one, you go out there at looking at the properties, finding the properties and doing all the works yourself. That's becoming an active investor. Or you can consider to become a passive investor. If you haven't got too much time, if you're cash rich and time poor, better to become a passive investor, because you can earn money from somewhere else and then therefore have somebody else invest in your property portfolio and help that to grow over a period of time. For many people, it's a catch-22, because you're in a job and you don't have too much cash, so therefore you're struggling to be able to raise money. So you have to really maximize on your usage of your weekends and your time, so you can become, first of all, an active investor, and then slowly begin to build and work towards becoming a purely passive investor. My own journey was very different, because I was a stay-at-home mom and I was time rich and cash poor. So I had all the time in the world and didn't have much cash. So which means I had to go and find investors who were cash rich and time poor, and do joint venture opportunities to be able to help me grow my own portfolio. So you need to know exactly where you are and where you can begin to look at in terms of getting started as a property investor. Oh, I think I mixed the slides before, but that's why I didn't have those 2 illustrations earlier on. So I think I have shared about what you'll be needing for your property. But let me just give you a scenario, okay? Because I want to give you something that is really what's the right word? Gosh, my English sometimes it just leaves me, like I could tell you in my native language quite easily, but I won't go down that route. You want to be first of all, as let me try and be as practical as I can be in helping you understand where you can consider looking at properties. And I'll give you some ideas, okay? So if I went to a place called Sunderland, or I went to a place called Newcastle up in the northeast, I could find properties that are affordable for somebody, for anybody, wherever you might be in the country. And that's because these houses are in demand because of what's going on economically in those key areas. So you want to understand the reasons for investing. So here's a typical one as an investment. So if I went to Northeast, if I went to Sunderland, I could find a property and purchase a property for £74,000, okay? A 3-bedroom house that I know will be able to rent out and give me a better income. If I take that same property, what I need to be able to have as cash is 25% deposit. That's 18,500. Now, if I say to you, okay, do you have 18,500? Maybe you might say yes, maybe you might say no. But if I say, can we work towards a budget or plan that we can raise 18,500? The answer, I'm sure, will be yes, I can. Whether that takes you a year or 2 years, you can work towards this. So if you take into all your fees associated, duty, solicitors' fees, brokers' fees, everything else, that comes to £25,000. So if we had a target of saying, can you save, for example, £1,000 a month over 2 years, that will get you £25,000, which means every 2 years you can be buying a property. Or could you save a little bit more so that you can buy properties maybe every 15 months as opposed to every 20 months? That becomes a possibility. So don't rule yourself out in terms of investment, because there are pockets in this country where you can start from. So don't think about having huge amounts of money. Think about, where do I start from? If I have the little in my hands, how do I make the little go a long, long way? You don't have anything, don't rule yourself out either. Come up with a structure where there's either 2 or 3 of you together. If there's 3 ladies together and think, let's put £500 every month in one pot. You could be buying a property, almost one property a year, because there's 3 of you doing that. So it's a power of collaboration, joint venture, the power of working together. So don't always ever think, until I get, how am I going to get there? I don't have what it takes. Think of, how can I get there? How can we do this creatively? Form a company together and start to buy properties in a company that we all are shareholders of a particular company. So there are ways in which you can get into property investment, but this is the typical scenario. If you're starting off from nowhere, this kind of property will give you income of about £550 a month. And the returns on investment on this particular property is about 14 to 14.5%, which is really good. If you put your money anywhere else, I don't believe you get money from the bank or any other place, because this kind of investment is a good one for you to start. You might end up after paying off all your fees with something like 400, 450, or even between 400 and 450. So here's a scenario that I want for you to consider, okay? When you want to become an investor, there's 2 things that which you have for investment portfolio. Either you have a repayment mortgage, or you have an interest-only mortgage. Sorry, that is unmuted, and I can hear the crackling in the background. So what you want to consider is to understand they can either have a property investment as either interest only or a repayment mortgage. When I was starting off, I had to maximize my money. So I went on for interest only products, because that allowed me to use a lot of my money in building the property portfolio. But some people might think, actually, I want to have a repayment, and that's okay, because it's all circumstance driven. So if you look on the left-hand side of the column and on the right-hand side of the column, you see there are 2 different amounts here. If I had bought that property at £500, at £74,000, and the rental income is £500, here's what would happen if I have an interest only or a repayment mortgage. If I have an interest only, I end up with £6,000 per month, okay? That's an interest only product, which means when I'm making money at the end, that's a repayment. Hold on. Yeah, that's an interest only one. So if I calculate my interest only per month, per year, not per month, per year of the 6,000, I have only paid 1,400 of interest. I pay the fees for managing the property of 575 per year. I pay the insurance of £200 a year, maintenance £200. I'm now left with £3,600 at the end of the year, because that was an interest only product. if I go for a repayment product, you look at the calculations, I end up in my pocket with £624, £624 per year, because it's a repayment. So I'm left with very little money. However, at the end of the short period of time we have borrowed money from the bank, I will end up with a property that is not is unencumbered. So the banks don't own it. I own it outrightly, and that's okay. But my view was, if I could have the 3,600 and have a lot of them, that will allow me to buy more properties. And when I reach my actual target of properties, then I can put my properties on a repayment. That was my strategy. So if you wanted to consider, you want to also know, where do I want to be and how do I want to be structured? You also want to consider, if you're going to put your properties, for example, on interest only, and you have got children, and you know you have no intention of ever selling your properties, what you're going to design is designing a portfolio of properties that will remain as a legacy for your children's children, because this property will be giving you income of 3,600. And as we know, historically, properties do go up in value over a longer period of time, because they are appreciating assets for most of the time. They do go down, but they'll always end up going up again. But if you bought property at £74,000, and after say 20 years, that property won't be valued at £74,000. It will end up maybe being valued at maybe 100 and something thousand pounds, which means just by virtue of keeping that property, you have gained money and also enjoyed your rental income. That's the different types of thinking. Now, not everybody thinks that way, and that's okay. There are those who much rather they just paid off everything else, not maximizing the bank, and that's fine, and just end up with unencumbered properties over a period of time. My strategy was to buy as many, maximize the money, and then begin to pay them off, because I've now reached my target in terms of how much I want to earn. Here are a few mistakes that many people overlook when it comes to property investments. People do not perform extensive due diligence of an area. So when you're going to become a property investor, make sure you perform extensive due diligence. Look at the future markets of the particular area, what the needs are, what the future needs are going to be. So I talked about Sunderland. Sunderland has a Nissan factory, and it's one of the growing the growing towns. I think it's not a city, I think it's a town in the UK. And if you look at the government plans, the government have a plan for the HS2 train to go up to Northeast from London. And so you can see that if the government are going to pump money into a particular area, that's a place you want to go and be investing in, not just because the property is cheap, but so you have to understand, is there viability in that particular market? Is at what is going on that will help me make an informed decision about investing in that particular area. So right now, people are thinking about, their current. Hold on, let me just move them. People are thinking about what the economy is currently doing. So you want to make sure your eyes are fixed on knowing exactly what's going on in the particular area. Is there a university town? And if there is there enough market? Or is the place saturated? And if it is saturated, move away from it. So before I bought properties in the Northeast, we ended up having to go to so many different towns on the ground, not because I went to seminar, but actually on the ground, and got to see it for myself, performed my extensive due diligence, and was able to make a decision in terms of where to buy. If you're going to buy from an auction or from agents, make sure, again, you have time to look at all the documentations. If you're buying from an auction, you can get all the documents from the auction company through your solicitors, and let the solicitor pay £200, but let them go through those documents so that you don't end up making a poor investment decision because of the kinds of properties you end up having to pay. Do the numbers stack up? It's not just because you bought a house. You must make sure that your numbers stack up according to your goals and your dreams. You set out to go and do these property investments, therefore, make sure that it's meeting your goal and your actual objectives, okay? I want for you to understand also the issue of debt. So you can either save money to be able to invest in a property yourself, or you can maximize the banks. And that means you go and leverage the banks. You can go and borrow money from the bank and use that money to be able to grow a portfolio. So there's two types of debt. Now, I know people will talk about, I don't want debt, I don't like debt, and I don't like debt. But there's two types of debt. There's investment debt and consumer debt. You want to ask yourself the question all the time, is this an investment? And if it is it a good investment? Or is this just consumer debt, which is all about liabilities? An asset is something that is bringing money into your pockets. A liability is taking money out of your pocket. So if you went and you bought lipstick, is that bringing money into your pockets? No, that's bad debt. So don't use that card. But if you go and buy, for example, you put down money for a deposit using money from the bank, is that a good asset? Let's make sure that the numbers stack up, and then it becomes a good investment. So understand that you can use debt, even in this situation, in this scenario where we're in, with the COVID, you can use debt, but make sure you use good debt that it's going towards an investment. And I want to hold it before I carry on. Pastor, how long do I have? Have I gone over the time? Please, could somebody just help me? I don't know whether I just missed thinking about time.
No, it's fine. You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, bro. Please give me a 5 minutes thumbs up. Just let your hands come up and I'll just be rounding up. Yeah. So I don't.
No worries.
Thank you very much. So here's, first of all, I want you to, I went past that slide. Okay. Here's the reason I'm talking about good debt and bad debt. Okay. So there is what is called the rule of 72. The rule of 72 is an old banking principle that banks use, and that they still use today, to be able to see how quickly they can make their money grow or work for them. Now, this works either against you or it works for you. So here's how it works. If I had, for example, £10,000 and I took my £10,000, gave it to my bank, okay? My bank is called Bank X, Y, and Z. They would have to take that £10,000 and be able to find somebody else who they're going to lend it to. And that will be sister whoever, because maybe she has borrows money from a credit card. So the banks, if I have £10,000, they will give me a return on that investment. Say, for example, 3% as an example, because right now we know it's about 0.5%, but 3%. How this rule works is that if you take 3, divide that by 72, that then gives you 72, it then gives you 24, which means it would take 24 years for your £10,000 to double, to become £20,000. So if I take the same amount of money, still leave it in the same bank, and I divide the same by 72, it will take another 20 years before my £20,000 becomes £40,000. Now imagine if you're saving money to buy a property, okay, and you need a deposit, and you need £40,000 deposit. It will take up to 48 years for your money to become £40,000 because you put it into savings account. So if I'm 40 right now, I'll be 88 at that age. I may not even be mortgageable. So which means it's not a good investment for me to put my money in the bank. If I take the same money, however, and invest it in another investment, maybe a stock somewhere or index stock or whatever, and I get 6%, for example, you divide 6 by 72, and that gives you, now you can see that gives you 12, which means your £10,000 will be growing every 12 years. Now, the way in which money works is not like 1 + 1 = 2. Money begins to compound over a period of time. And that's why this rule of 72 is so important for you to know whether you're working for it or it's working against you. So if you look at 6%, at the same number of years, £10,000, but I'm getting 6%, I end up with £160,000. If I take the same money, £10,000, rather than giving it to the bank or to a stock market, put it in a stock market, I put that same money into a property and I'm getting 12%. You divide 12 by 72 and that gives you 6, which means every 6 years, you can see 6. Every 6 years, your money is doubling. And it begins to grow by doubling up, interest upon interest growing. So the same amount of money I've invested at 12%, I now end up getting £2.5 million over the same 48 period. So you can see, if it's 3%, I get 40. If it's 6%, I get 160. If it's 12%, I get £2 million. So your job is to begin to ask the question, where should I be parking my money so that it begins to grow over a period of time in favor of me rather than against me. Because this is how the banks will work. If I put my money in my bank will take that money. They will either have a lending division called the credit card division, or they'll put it into maybe another department that will be looking at money markets, and that they'll lend the money maybe to Zambia or any other countries and make the money grow, charge those people higher interest, and they make money that way. So your job is not, if I'm going to spend any more money on a credit card or whatever, am I working for the bank or is the bank working for me? Now, if I want to now use this rule to work for me, I will now go and borrow the £10,000, for example, from the bank and go through a mortgage and pay 3% to the bank. And I find an investment property that's giving me 14%. After I've paid the bank their money, and I've paid off all the other fees, I may end up with like 10%. See, I've now maximized the bank to grow a property portfolio, which is what I had to do because I didn't have the money that was stuck somewhere, so I could just use that money. I literally began to think of how do I now maximize the bank. I was so bad with money before. I would buy hair and all the different things. But when I learned about how money works, I thought, how do I begin to make the money now work for me? Which should be the one education you must take and begin to think everything else that I'm doing, is it working for me or is it working against me? And if it's not working against you, and if it is working against you, change. And you can change by telling your money where to go, creating a monthly budget. So you literally are prioritizing your money. Okay, this is how I would do. If I was earning £3,200, I would take all the money before it even gets into my bank account. I allocate the money accordingly. So you use this to break down. I am a Christian. I got to give my money onto God. So I'll take out the 3,000. 10% of 3,200 is £320. Put money towards my household expenses. 20% for my investment. Allocate everything, including what I will call, very important, what I will call African tax. Okay, African tax, and the reason why it's there is because I'm an African woman, and where I come from, I have family that I have to support and etc. But if I don't budget, they'll always be calling for my attention, and in the end, I end up borrowing from the bank so I can meet that particular need. But if you budget and plan accordingly, and when they come and it's finished, it's finished. There's no point. I don't have right now. When I have next month, I'll add you to my particular budget. It's called discipline. It's called diligence. It's called taking care of what God has entrusted in your hands. So you literally are being very intentional with your personal savings. And out of that, you find that if you're saving some money, if you're putting 20% of your income in your investment pot of 640 over a period of time, you begin to now take that money and put it into an investment that hopefully will give you a better opportunity in getting started on the property ladder. So basically, in a nutshell, once you've got your savings plan and you've got all those things, now you begin to think, which property investment strategy must I consider? Property is a massive subject, big industry, okay? There's commercial property, there's residential properties. I only do at the moment residential. I'm partly commercial, but majority of what I do is all around residential. Within residential properties, the strategies such as the conventional buy-to-let, you just buy a house, rent it out to a family. That's a conventional buy-to-let, nothing complicated, just buy one house and rent it out to a family, or done. Second strategy is flipping. You buy property below the market value because it might need a little bit of work to get done. And then afterwards, you either sell it on or you just go back and refinance from the bank to take out all the money you put into it. Usually it works better if you actually end up having to sell the property. So you buy the house, do it all up, bring it up to value, and then be able to make some profit that way. HMO is a house of multiple occupation, where you take a house, a 3-4 bedroom house, and turn it into a 5 beds. So it's like a house share, like a student accommodation, like service, like service apartments. So all, in fact, even with the model that we have right now for many people is what you're also are hearing around your not rent to. You use it for rent to rent. So the rent to rent model is where you rent a property, be able to rent it out to multiple people, so you can maximize on your rental income. Rather than just receiving one rent, you receive multiple rentals. If one room is not occupied, you still get income from the other ones. If the property is not done very well, you still are able to earn some money as opposed to just having a conventional buy-to-let with just one particular tenant in that particular house. You could consider service accommodation, where you buy a property, and is right now, if you look at things like the Airbnb, they are in that category of like service apartments. So obviously, you buy a house and then have the rooms and you rent them out, and people are checking in and checking out, either as a whole house or even just as room. You could rent out your spare room in your own home. Right now, the government have got an incentive where people can rent out a room in their home, and it's part of you being incentivized by the government. And it's okay for you to do that for even for tax purposes. That it helps you to be able to save some money. You can buy either down south, or you can buy properties up north. If you're struggling to be able to buy properties on your own, consider joint venture opportunities. If you're struggling to buy properties on your own, consider rent to rent. You rent a house from somebody else and turn the house into multiple rooms. If you're struggling, you can start by sourcing, become a sourcer of properties, learn sourcing. But sourcing, may I just say, it's a business and you can make money becoming a sourcer. However, do it the legal way. There's a way that is illegal and there's a way that is legal. Make sure you do it the legal way. You could consider a lease option if you don't have enough money to be able to buy a lease option. So you lease a property from someone with an option to buy after X number of years. So there are properties for somebody who's thinking, I can't rent this house anymore, I'm struggling, or maybe I'm retired, or whatever their circumstances are, but you rent it from them and agree in 5 years' time, I will buy it from you at this price we've agreed today. That's a lease option. You could think about part by part rent, shared ownership with the local authorities, or you could even consider land banking. Land banking is where you find land in particular spots that potentially for future growth that you buy in that particular area. And after some time, you can take that same piece of land, subdivide the piece of land and sell it off, which works quite commonly. It does work even here in the UK. Your job is to know that particular strategy and learn it and begin to apply yourself in that way. So basically, that then is where I would say for you, if you want to get started around the whole property journey, getting started, that those are the key areas for you to be able to look at and to think around. So I've spoken very quickly, and I hope that you picked up one or two ideas for you to begin to apply. And I hope that you have been blessed and that you have a blessed afternoon. Back on to, I think it's Pastor Liz or whoever the moderator is on the call.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. It was really, really good. Thank you so much, Caroline, for sharing the knowledge with us. I really, really enjoyed the fact that you had so much detail and the numbers. I mean, I've been to so many of these property investments and they just skim over a lot of the information, but you actually went into the detail, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sure everybody on the call appreciated that as well. One thing that I really got from what you said today was, if you want to change the fruit, change the root. And for me, that is key, because having that success mindset is so important. So thank you so much, Caroline. I really, really appreciate you taking the time out and sharing with us so much knowledge. I'm sure all of the ladies on the call have written notes down. There's so many notes. You should write a book, by the way. There's so many notes, and there's so many things that you spoke about that are just gems. So thank you again. I've got some questions for you. They've come through on the Slido chat. So for everybody, this is our question and answer session, and we have some questions, and we're going to ask Caroline. We're going to ask Caroline these questions. So the first question is, if I buy a property up north, would it be cheap? Would a residential or investment? Would that be a residential or investment property? So if I buy a property up north, would that be a residential or investment property? And is it cheaper? Which one will be cheaper, basically? And wouldn't it end up being more expensive if I have to put down 25%? So there's a couple of questions there, so I'm going to break it down a little bit. So this person is saying, if I buy a property up north, would it be a residential or an investment property?
Okay, so to answer that question, maybe I should mean to ask, is that going to be, will I be considered having bought that property as a principal primary residence as opposed to an investment property? So there are two things. You can buy properties as a principal primary residence, which means you live in that house. Now, I'm talking about buying as an investment. So if you're going to buy in the Northeast, those properties you want, unless you live in the Northeast, then that's fine. But if you're in the South, you want to buy that as an investment property because you can afford it. And if I answer the second question where she's talking about will it be cheaper to buy in the North than to buy in the South? I'll give you an example. If you're buying in the South, the same property, a 3-bedroom house, is about £350,000 for a 3-bedroom property. If you think about the deposit that you have to put down, plus all other fees, if 25% deposit what you need, you're moving towards close to £100,000 in deposit and all other fees. Now, if you took £100,000 to the Northeast and the property I just shown you in Sunderland, all your fees, everything else is £25,000, which means you can buy 4 properties from your £100,000. If you look at the return on investment, but very, very important to consider, if you look at that same property, what is it yielding you? The one at 350 in London is going to give you maybe rental income of 1250 as an for argument's sake. 1250, if you do your numbers there, you're looking at maybe 4 to 5% return on your investment. So your money is not working harder. Remember the rule of 72? Your job is to make sure the money works for you. So it's not working hard enough. If I take the same amount of money and I buy 4 properties, right? And I'm going to get 500 from each property after paying off all the bills, maybe say for argument's sake, 350 in my pocket or 400. I now end up with a property portfolio with 4 houses and the income of, at 14% return. What is your objective? I'm buying so I can have cash flow, so that the cash flow would meet my financial freedom number. So my financial freedom number allows me to get the freedom so I can begin to build my wealth. So again, just get clarity on that. Now, if you want to buy in the South because you're looking at capital growth, that's also okay. But if you don't have much money, why wait on capital growth that you don't even have? Start where you are. So that would be my feedback, as to consider those 2 responses as to why you're having to buy in the North as opposed to buying in the East. You ask about 25% deposits. For every investment property that you're going to buy, unless it's one you're going to live in, if you're living in the property yourself, the government will charge you for not the government, the banks will lend you to up 10% as a deposit. So it works out in your favor. Not an investment property. For every investment properties, you always end up having to pay a little bit more. That's just how it is.
Thank you very much. You answered that question. There is another one. Must I be financially free before I look into acquiring a property?
What do you mean financially free?
Oh, the question, it just says financially free. So I'm assuming probably without debt, without bills. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I mean, if you talk about financial freedom, if you want to be financially free, which means that your current expenses are being met, okay, with your other passive income. So that means your financial freedom. But if you mean maybe should I have cleared up or come out of all of my debts? If you got bad debts that will reflect not so great in terms of your credit history, sometimes it's better for you to clear that before you can borrow money. Other times you can find some other lenders who will lend you even when your credit history is not brilliant. So they will lend you some money, but the interest rates will be a little bit higher. So it just depends on your circumstances. And I would encourage you to go and find a mortgage broker, sit with them and talk about your circumstances and talk about your dreams, what you're wanting to do, and if that's feasible or not.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question, we've got the questions flowing in now, which is good. Everybody's engaged. Okay. If 2 people want to buy a property, do both of them have to have their names on the documents? And do you need to register both people for tax purposes?
Okay, so there are different ways in which you can buy properties together. So you can buy properties as in individuals and be on the title, together, people that are on that particular title in terms of the number of people. There's also another way which you can buy properties together by setting up a company. and that company becomes a limited company and you're shareholders. You can decide who you want to nominate as a majority shareholder, or you have 50-50 shareholding in that particular company, and buy properties using that vehicle. For tax purposes, with the current changes in legislation, just for some people that are high taxpayers, it's actually working out beneficial that way, set up as a company, which, you know, and then for others, it's not beneficial, because if you don't earn too much money, then it's just no real point. But to answer your question, you can buy properties together, either be on the title together for two people. The complexity comes when there's more of you in that investment property portfolio. If there's maybe 3 or 4 of you, it is better you set up a company and then you are directors in that particular company and buy properties using the directorship. And you also have other legal things in place, because obviously then you know if anything happened to any one of us, or whether you were ill or passed or you fell out, that you know you have got a legal entity and can be represented in court to be able to have your money share. And it's important for you to, it doesn't matter whether you're best of friends, if you're going to get into joint venture partnership, make sure everything is done properly and you have your legal documentation, just so life can be, you know, sometimes life that does change, which we are all human beings at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Just conscious of time, I think we have time for probably one more question. And so this question says, if you rent a property from someone and then you rent the rooms out, it means that you're turning the house into multiple occupation. These usually require licenses. So how do you work around that?
It's a business, so it's a business model. So for everything else you're trying to consider, the best thing is just take all that into account, because you don't have the money. Because you've got to think, if you need to buy a massive house and you need X amount of money to get started, it's usually quite capital intense running a HMO. But if you're going to do a rent to rent, you're not having to lay out as much money. And you don't have the legal obligations of a mortgage, if that makes sense. So that way you're somewhat starting off from where you are. You will have to go through, in areas where you need planning, you have to go through planning, and just do everything else by the books, because ultimately what you may be scared of is just getting the paperwork in place, and that can be done. The cost of it for HMO, where we have HMOs, we pay £1,050 for a HMO license, and that lasts for five years, I believe it is. Yeah, 5 years. So if you think about it, it's not a huge amount of money, but you must get your paperwork in place. You must get the house in good order with fire doors, etc., of which most landlords are also happy to work with.
Thank you very much. I think that's our last question, because I'm just conscious of time. Thank you again so much, Caroline. Like I said, you should write a book about this, because the amount of information you've given today has been amazing. Everybody on this call agrees with me in terms of just the detail, the level of detail is just so good, and we actually understand things now in terms of the different strategies, in terms of getting everything in order. So thank you very much for that.